Hey YouTube, how's it going? It's Quentin here, and welcome to tutorial number 21. And in this tutorial, I am going to talk to you guys about the do while loop, which is slightly different to the while loop, but not by much. So let's first start off by taking a look at the code from the previous tutorial. So I'm going to paste that in right now. And if you guys can remember, I told you guys that a while loop first checks for the condition and then runs the code only if this condition over here is true. And if this condition is false, then this code inside of the while loop will never ever run. So let's say I changed my counter to 11, so I started counting at 11. Well, then this kind of makes our condition false because now counter is not less than or equal to 10. It's 11. So now that condition's false. And if I go ahead and save this and I run this in Firefox, you can see we get a blank web page. Nothing happens. Why? Because that code doesn't run because this condition is false. Now, although that works, there might be a time when you would like your code in the loop to run at least once before checking the condition or before deciding to stop, even if the condition is false. And for this reason, we have the do while loop. And the syntax for the do while loop goes as follows. So let me just go ahead and delete this. Okay, we type in the word do, which as you can see it's a keyword, so it's turned blue. And then we're not putting any parentheses in here right now. What we're going to do is we're going to open our curly braces, and inside of it here, that is where our statements will go. So this is where whatever we want to happen inside of our loop, this is where all of that goes. And then at the bottom, after this closing curly brace, we type in the word while, and then we'll put in our parentheses, okay? And inside these parentheses, that's where we will put our condition. So as you guys can see from this syntax, when this loop runs, the computer first does all of these lines of code. So it reaches this line that says do, and it goes, okay, you want me to do stuff? And then it goes ahead and it runs all of these statements inside of our loop first, and then it comes down and it sees the condition here, and then it checks the condition and it goes, okay, is this condition true? And if the condition is true, then it'll start the loop again and carry on going until this condition becomes false. So much like a while loop, it'll carry on looping until the condition becomes false. And then after that, the computer would obviously continue with the rest of our code, but in this case there isn't any, so that would be the end of the program. Now, because we only check for the condition at the end of the statement, this means that this code inside of the state or inside of this loop will always run at least once, even if this condition is false, because we're only checking for the condition at the end. So let's go ahead and test this out a few times. Okay, and what we need to do is we also have to have a counter for this loop, because we need to count how many times this loop runs. Otherwise, we're going to end up having an infinite loop, and like I told you guys, infinite loops are bad. You don't ever want to make one. So I'm not even going to make one just for the purposes of showing you. It's just don't go there. Just make sure that you always use a counter. So I'll go ahead and say var counter, and we might as well start counting at 1 because we're people, so 1, and then we'll put in some statements inside here. So let's say I want to print something out on the screen. We can just go ahead and say document dot write, and what do we want to write on the screen? We might as well just write this is iteration and then we'll concatenate our counter on here, and then we'll also concatenate a break tag just to make sure that every time this is printed out, it'll appear on a new line. Okay, so we'll go ahead and put a semicolon on there, and then we'll go ahead and increment our counter. Like I told you guys in the previous tutorial, we have to make sure that our counter is always incremented inside of our loop. So that way this counter will eventually it'll keep going up, and then it'll eventually meet our condition, which we will set right now. So let's go ahead and we'll say this must loop 10 times. So in order to do that, we'll just say while counter is less than or equal to 10. Okay, so we're including 10 in our loop. So that means we'll run 1 time, 2 times, 3 times until we get to 10. It'll still run when counter is equal to 10, but after that counter will be equal to 11 and the code will never run. Okay, the code inside the loop will stop. Sorry. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this and go back to Firefox, and we can click refresh, and as you can see, we now have 10 lines printed out on the screen, and it just says this is iteration 1, this is iteration 2, this is iteration 3, and so on. So you can see our loop actually ran 10 times. And if we want to fix this little space issue up, then we can probably just go ahead and go back to our code and put a space in our sentence over there. So go ahead and save that now. Click refresh, and we've got some spaces in between our numbers, which just looks a little bit more tidy. Okay, now that's what would happen if our condition inside our parentheses here was true, but let's say it was false. So let's go ahead and change counter back to 11. So that means that when we finally reach this counter condition over here, when we finally reach this condition, counter, it's going to evaluate to false because counter is 11. So 11 is not less than or equal to 10. But let's go ahead and save this and then go back to Firefox, click refresh, and see what happens. As you can see, the loop still ran once, even though this condition over here was false. Our loop still ran once. And that's because we checked for our condition at the end. So we ran the code first, we told the computer do this, okay, so the computer went ahead and it printed this out on the screen, and then it increased counter, and then it checked the condition. It was like, okay, hold up, you only wanted me to print this out on the screen as long as counter was less than or equal to 10. Well, I've done it once for you already anyway, but seeing as the condition is false, we'll just stop right there. Okay, so that's what a do while loop does. It will loop very similar to a while loop, except it'll always loop at least once, or the code inside the loop will always print at least once, as even if the condition is false, basically. So that's all I have for you guys in this video, and don't forget to subscribe, and if you guys found this video helpful, then please leave a comment below or just click that like button. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.